we're actually doing here, which is updating the guidance on 12 fire critical assets that we identified 18 months ago now. This is obviously looking in terms of the fire safety and the Building Safety Acts, but also the fact that, you know, the industry's changed very markedly in the last year. I'm going to ask George to give a sort of brief overview, just to put things in context. Now, many of you will have heard of this before several times, and I apologise for that. But half of the people in that are most of our meetings now are new. So we like to give them a bit of context, sort of like where BIM4Housing is, where we're going, and why we're doing it. So, George, if you want to go for it.
Cool. Okay. Well, when we took over BIM4Housing a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, one of the things that we wanted to do was move it away from BIM being about 3D modeling and focus on better information management. And the question is, what information do we actually need to manage? And different stakeholders need different things. So we set up different working groups, which meet once every 2 months. So we've got 36 of these meetings each year. And typically they have 20, 30 people attend the meetings. And what we do, we try and look at what information would make their tasks easier. And, you know, for example, what would make a construction team's work easier if developers provided them with better information, and likewise operations teams if the construction team handed over better information. So the way in which we acted on that is to set up work streams, which then work for probably 3 or 4 months to focus on certain things. So, for example, we focused on producing standard data templates, standard processes. The work that we're doing today has come out of the fire safety group, looking at typical critical assets. We've got a lot going on at the moment with decarbonisation, and also trying to standardise digital records and safety case reports. So just to put it in context, one of the challenges that we've got is that different people want different information about the same asset for different purposes, and we'll see that today in the meetings. So the fact is that people need either different information or different levels of detail. And what we're learning is that certain of this information is fixed and therefore is repeatable, and therefore can probably be delivered in the form of PDFs. But other information changes, is variable or active, and it's really useful to be able to differentiate between the two. The other thing is that a lot of the things that we've got going on at the moment, particularly because of the Building Safety Act, are snapshots in time. And although it's important to have a safety case report, we also need to recognise that the landlords have got to have everything current at that point in time. So you can't simply say, well, yeah, we were okay when we did the fire risk assessment last year. It's needs to change as risks change. And then to be able to then tie everything back to an individual asset, not simply be recording the fact that we've done an inspection. So part of the process of doing that is to use RFIDs or tags for asset types. But one of the things that's important is to recognize that we're ending up with lots and lots of golden threads. So from a construction point of view, we're probably testing to make sure that certain information has been provided. From a manufacturer's point of view, it's important to tie that together with what the product was that was actually satisfying it, and then the product data that is being provided, but then looking at it in the context of where it is. So from a fire engineering point of view, you really need to know what the spaces are on either side. So that's why what we're trying to do is federate together all of these different threads that are being produced by people using excellent applications like Plan Radar, Riskbase, Hilti, Keystone, CX. The important thing is that they shouldn't be all separate, isolated information sets. We need to be able to bring them together. And that's one of the reasons we need the information in a machine readable format. A lot of the information in this data sheet, for example, is well laid out, easy to understand, but it can only be understood by a human. So fire rating, for example, is presented in this way that a human can read it, but it's not machine readable. Because if you look at it, here's another data sheet, and the fire rating is described quite differently. And the same here on a different data sheet. The information's there, but you need to manually interpret it. So certain of the information we want to try and make sure is machine readable. So we've been on this journey for the last couple of years with HACT and organizations to try and come up with standardized data templates, which if you're interested, we can share some of these with you. And the point about that is that that can be used either for new projects or for existing buildings. And if we can organize it in that way, it doesn't really matter what software you're using, because we can present the information in a standardized format. This is some of the work in progress that we did with HACT to come up with the 250 or so standard asset types that we've got. So here, for example, you'll see on the left-hand side in column B, we've got standardized names that have been agreed across the different social landlords as to what something is called. Now, that might seem blindingly obvious, but if you look in the synonyms column, you'll see that an AOV, for example, is described as either an automatic opening vent or a smoke vent. But by putting them into classifications, it means that we can start to provide some sort of order we can tie data back to. So we've actually got 152 safety related assets identified, of which 71 relate specifically to fire. Now that obviously is again interpretation, but it gives us a basis on which to work. You might have some of you will know about COBE, some may not, but COBE is the international standard for asset information exchange, handover information exchange. So that's what we tend to use to do the high level information. So here, for example, this is common to any type of asset. Doesn't matter whether it's some plasterboard, a door, a fire collar, a smoke vent. They're all standard. The thing that makes it different, the difference between the attributes that are needed for a fire collar or a damper or a door or a wall, will be down to that particular type of element. And the question is, which attributes do we include? Building Smart or the BIM community has got a large data set that we work to. But there's other information as well. There's classification systems. MBS have got their own data sets. CIBSI have got their own data sets as well for building services. The surveyors and cost managers, they've got their own data sets as well, as have the wholesalers and merchants. They use ETIM. So the question is, which attributes should we or shouldn't we include? Well, the fact is that we probably need to include all of them, because different people will want the different information. So if we just look at one, this is the AOV one that we did last week. Here we've got a range of different attributes in here, which are all machine readable. Some of them may not be needed from an asset management point of view or a safety point of view. Mechanical load rating or wind load rating may be things that would be adequate just to have as a PDF. So part of the exercise today that we're going to go through is just understanding whether we've got the right information sets for this type of asset. So we led the Golden Thread initiative, which L&Q set up for asset and survey information. And one of the challenges was to ask some of the people who are on this call, actually, what data do we need to know about firewalls? And the answer to the question is invariably, it depends. It depends on where that wall is, what's it doing, and also how it relates back to building regs. So that's the purpose that we did. And this is the exercise. We've done this now for 10 of the 12 asset types. Today, we're doing this. Tomorrow, we're finishing off with dry and wet risers. And each of these different processes, we've actually looked at what does the asset comprise? So how is it made up? And also, what information can we put in, for example, for this door that can be managed separate from the BIM models, but is specific to it being a door? So for the firewall, some of these, like fire rating, for example, may be common, but obviously a lot of these others won't be. So we need to be able to hold this in a database rather than in the BIM systems, because it might be that it's not just BIM systems, but also we want it for procurement and operations. So the way in which we go about that is by holding it in databases and then using API connectors to connect it back to the applications. So that's why this exercise that you're going through today is so important. It also means that when new information comes in, like the new FIRE standards, it means that we can relate it easily to that same information and do that as an update. So I'm just going to show, this is what we've already got with, this is what we're going to go through today. What is a firewall? What risks does the wall mitigate? Now, we have to answer that question to align it with what the regulator's looking for. We also wanted to identify from the roundtable sessions what actually goes wrong. And Matt Taylor, who's on this call, gave us some great examples of things that don't work. And then, I mean, there's a lot of things that people do wrongly to prevent the firewall from working. The next question that we're going to go through is what information's needed. And this is where we want to try and get to that machine readable information, if at all possible. And then we're going to go on to talk about the tasks that are required to ensure that things are installed properly, commissioned, inspected, and maintained properly. And then finally, we go on to competency. So what levels of competency are needed? Big topic normally. And how should we manage changes? So this is the work that was done 18 months ago. So we're now refreshing this to reflect what we've learned over the last couple of years. Okay, back to you, Richard.
Great, George, thank you. Just if you want to load up the document, just to say at the top, this meeting is recorded and you'll be given a link to that recording in the next day or so. What we also do is do a high point sort of minutes document, which you'll also receive. Now that high points minutes isn't just about what's happening verbally in the meeting. It's also about what's in the notes in the chat. So please do use the chat. If you've got comments on something that's adjacent to what we're actually talking about, put it in the chat, and it'll perhaps be in find its way into the appendix of the document itself. We'll try and stick very much to these questions. If something comes up in a sort of an adjacent subject, if we've got time, we'll talk about it at the end. Okay, so let's get started. What risks do dry lining and firewalls mitigate? Have a little look through. Alan.
Yes, I read through it yesterday, Richard, and there's one thing I want to point out, and that is the bottom bullet point that we can see there says they provide both integrity and insulation, i.e. prevent the spread of head. That should be prevent the spread of heat, surely.
It should. Jess, can you put that correct? You make that correct, I should say.
And then later on, it mentions the spread of heat. If you could just scroll down a little bit.
Yeah, Jess, just correct that head heat first, will you? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I changed it. Can you see?
What?
I already changed it into heat.
Oh, it's not showing on the screen.
Let me just close the sharing end.
It's at the bottom of the screen. Just
Is it okay? Can you see?
I can't see it yet. Just a black.
yes.
Okay, right. So sorry, Alan. So the one further down, what?
Yeah, and then the one further down, it says the spread of heat. It should be the transfer of heat. You don't spread heat, you transfer heat.
Transfer heat. Well, that's transference of heat then.
Transference of heat, yes.
Yeah, transference of heat.
And again, it says up above it. So it says they provide both integrity, stay up as a barrier, and insulation, prevent the spread of heat. That should be prevent the transfer or transference of heat.
Right. Okay. So where it says prevent, that's it.
That's it. That's the one.
The transference of heat. Okay. Yeah. Good points. Good points. Anybody else got anything that is glaringly missing or needs amending on that list? Is that the bottom of the list, just?
Sorry, I've just got a comment there. There's one above, just where we were. Applications.
Sorry.
It says applications include escape corridors and firefighting.
Yes, yes.
Should applications been in there? It's what they mitigate, not the application, isn't it? Not where
No,
you
it
use.
shouldn't be. No, that should be.
It should be some. It should be somewhere, but
yeah, not there. You're correct. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, just looking down the list. Where is it? Second item down, risk of smoke buildup. What do you mean by that? Because the risk of smoke buildup, if it's a compartment and the compartment isn't ventilated, it's the ventilation system that deals with the smoke buildup.
Yeah, I think that needs removing. Do you think?
Right.
What do you think, Matt?
I would say, I mean, we've got spread of smoke in there. That I think there's a number of different factors in relation to smoke buildup, including sort of ventilation and other services concerns, which is generally outside of the dry lining.
Do you remove it then? Take it out?
I think it's covered elsewhere. I think it's covered in
Okay.
spread of smoke, but
excellent. Anything else?
Point,
sorry,
well, if I can, the risk of degraded acoustics. Are we saying risk of detriment to proposed or specified acoustic performance?
I don't know. It depends. I don't know who added that.
We had. I can't remember exactly, but this came up on a number of meetings about acoustics, and it was a new one to many people. But at the time, it made sense, but I don't remember the background to it.
So the only risk that I can understand about degrading acoustics is the risk of the sounders not being heard from one space to another, but that's mitigated separately. So the wall itself will provide airborne sound insulation. That's one of the reasons it's there in the first place. So as a risk, it will be about the sounders, but again, I think that's mitigated separately in the sounders themselves.
Yeah, let's take it out then.
Take that out. Cheers.
Not a problem with having fewer of these, Joe.
No. Just to give people a bit of background, I'm the technical director at the FIS, so we represent the manufacturers and the constructors in this sector.
Right, just risk of specified acoustics, take out.
Yeah, I took it out.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah, it's gone.
Okay. Anyone got anything else that needs covering or not
Yes,
covering?
if you look at under transference of heat, it says spread of smoke, hot gases. I'm pretty sure that gases is only one S, not double S.
Right, correct that, Jez.
Can I just say that quite a few of these are repeats of themselves, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I reckon half of that list is probably a repeat of the other half of the list.
Yeah.
Could be, I mean, offline, it would be worth just going through and culling a lot of them that say the same thing.
Yeah, looking at covered deduping.
You've got transference of heat in about 10 different ways.
Yeah.
And transference of smoke, and at the end of the day, it's we're saying the same thing many times, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
let's scroll down to the next one.
Ian, is that something you could help Richard with afterwards?
Ian?
Sorry, I muted myself.
Could you help me do some of that deduping after the meeting?
I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. Just look at them all, and if I got a copy of this offline, I can.
Yeah, if you could do that.
Give an opinion.
The reason, I think part of the reason there's a lot of duplication is because a number of people put comments on that were slightly different and had a slightly different emphasis than others, and we didn't want to miss anything out. But if an expert can help me actually go through that and make it just one line instead of 5, that'd be excellent. Alan.
Okay.
Yes, looking at the bullet point just before the bottom where it says substitution of components for an alternative, generally data is based. So that's reading correctly. Yeah. Generally data is based on a full system from one manufacturer. There's other people here who can probably be better to confirm this, but I think it should say one board manufacturer. The fire tests tend to be done by board manufacturers, and I think it's important to put the word board in there.
Somebody's shaking their head very strongly.
Plasterboard manufacturer.
No, you can be a systems manufacturer coming at it from a number of routes. Right. The two most popular routes are board manufacturer or stud manufacturer.
Ah, right, okay.
So there are stud manufacturers who are system owners in their own right.
Okay.
Right, okay. I stand corrected, thank you.
No, you're
okay,
welcome.
Anybody else got anything on this one? Could scroll down to the bottom of it, Jess. What risks are drylining and firewalls susceptible themselves?
I think we've got the same issue as Ian suggested earlier. There's doubling up.
Yeah, well, that's not an issue because we're going to sort that out afterwards.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know whether you're planning to put these in some sort of order, but the first risk is incorrectly specified. And so you've got selection further down, selection comes up, but if the specification is wrong, everything but thereafter will be wrong.
Right. Now we've had this before. This is George, help me with this. Didn't we have this before? And it's about this is about the asset. You're talking about what's the risk to the asset itself.
Yeah.
Now,
sorry,
wrong specification isn't a risk to the asset itself. It's a risk to the George, help me.
Yeah. So I guess what we're saying here, this particular clause was put in, Joe. It's added in. That's why it says 1B. It's because when we've been in the meetings, people have told us about things that maybe tenants do or people do to the asset to stop them from working. So that's the purpose of it, rather than looking at the design and construction side of things, which we do come on to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is that this is a long list which can then be filtered by for different purposes. So the interpretation of what these points are can be done maybe in maybe organizations' asset information requirements and things like that. So that's another point. It's designed to be it's defined to be a long list that can then be filtered and presented in different ways. Alan. You're on mute, Alan.
Apologies, you can hear me now. If you look at the bullet point that is 5 from the bottom, and it says non-complaint, adaptation and maintenance, that should be non-compliant.
Compliant, yeah. Agreed.
Thanks.
I've had a quick scan. I mean, the biggest risk, I think, to an asset in its lifetime, apart from damage, is when anybody actually does anything to it. And the biggest thing that we see post-installation are pipe and service penetrations.
Yes.
Is that covered in this? I couldn't see it as I was going through.
I think there's inadequate coordination with MEP services, but I think specifically you're quite right that could you just put something in the chat as a
George?
Yeah,
I've just put something in the chat. I think it's post-occupancy work.
Isn't it covered by modifications impacting their integrity?
I wonder whether people would understand that, whether you need to be really basic. You know, don't put a pipe and a duct through something that's already there without designing it.
Okay, well, if you could put something in the chat for us, then we can pick that up and we won't miss it. Matt.
I'm just thinking, I'm not entirely sure at this time how this might be worded within the bullet points, but one of the risks that I see time and time again is the assumption that a system can be used in a bespoke arrangement and still achieve the same fire performance as the tested system. So I'll explain that. The system manufacturers test under sort of quite strict test guidelines in terms of trying to prove a system is capable of providing a certain fire performance. And now even under European standard, there's less extended application scope for extended application of that test information. But when we design buildings, we design interfaces as we want that interface to look. So we look at sort of various sort of weird and wonderful arrangements and assume that the standard test information for that manufacturer's system is going to cover that, and that's going to be...
We've got a section on information. I think possibly it would be more relevant there, Matt. Several other people had their hands up, which have now gone down. Anybody else got anything to add to this section?
Jimmy, you had your hand up.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not sure on the protocol here. Do you have to keep?
No, don't, Jim.
Have to keep it on.
Yeah,
sorry,
Jimmy.
It was just basically on.
Please
it
put
was
your
just
hands
basically
up.
on the post-occupancy.
Sorry, just let me finish. Please put your hands up and keep them up until you've been called.
Oh, right. Okay. You kept going off.
Jimmy. Jimmy.
Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's similar to what Matt's saying, just a bullet point saying extended heights is quite misleading and vague, and I don't think that's particularly helpful. There was also a note above about testing to a cause and effects document. What? I'm not quite sure what that means.
Right, sorry, well, let's do one at a time. So you're talking, what's the one at the bottom?
It just says extended heights.
Extended heights, right. Does anybody know what that means?
Well, it's
reference
referenced,
or should mean?
Yeah, it's in reference to the changes the removal of the BS series and the move to EN, as Matt was alluding to, and there's fewer field of applications available in Drylining.
So it's
But
not clear. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's.
Could you put something? Could you put something in the chat for me that would be clearer?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Sorry, and the second point, I think it was further up, was around.
Scroll up, Jess.
Jim is from Canalf, by the way, so just to.
Here we go. Sorry, risk that the asset has not been tested against the cause and effect document. What is the cause and effect document?
Joe, would you know that?
Because as Matt alluded to,
sorry, it's on mute. No.
We test to an EN by a test methodology. I don't know what that means.
That's come up. A number of the meetings have alluded to a cause and effect document.
Yeah, it's part of the fire strategy, I think.
Okay.
Is anybody on? I mean, there's a lot of people on this call that are much more knowledgeable than me, but certainly I've heard of cause and effect documents regularly.
I could pick that one up maybe. So it's Ian Doncaster here. We do smoke ventilation systems.
Thank you.
So when we're commissioning a system, we would need to check it does certain things under certain different conditions. So that would, and our cause and effect document would be that. But it's more about mechanical operation under different conditions and stuff, really, or under different control conditions. So it's about the control strategy to make the fire strategy. But I could see the only reason might be something like which side the fire's coming from, because depending on the cause and effect, you might have fire from the inside or the outside of a shaft that's made of wall construction.
What's the view of the group? Should we have something in there that relates to that, or should we take it out?
I'd take it out personally, I think. But
right, take that out, Jess. Tim.
Yes, I was just going to make it's a thought occurred to me. In asbestos management, we always have permit to work stickers all over the place, and it seems to me that when you've got something like a fire, something that is fire compartmentation, and there is a temptation to so I can just drill through that. Is that there should be a warning to say, well, you've got to actually go through this process. So I don't know whether that falls within that, but it's more about how you manage it going forward. But yeah, it does seem to me, because we came across stuff on a hospital where they put in cabling for monitoring, and they breached all sorts of things, and the thing was bloody leaking. It was that bad. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think that comes down partially to, which we'll be covering shortly, which is competence, and also information, because it's down to the information about the wall and what should and shouldn't happen with it, I think.
I don't know if anybody could see. Can you see what Joe's holding up? Can you see that, Richard?
No.
Yeah, he's holding up a sticker. Do you want to explain what that is, Joe?
Yeah, if any of you have got a smartphone, if you hold your smartphone up to that QR code, it will take you to a set of information. And the idea of the sticker is it sits in the void above a ceiling, and it warns people. It's warning, this is a firewall, providing compartmentation. Don't do anything until you've checked this out. And the QR code then will take the user to advice on how to plan it, to ensure that you get a compliant seal depending on what the service penetration is. And it's advice which is based on a piece of guidance that was produced by BSA, ASFP, FIS and BISRIA recently. And also the advice from ASFP, their Red Book.
So
okay, right. So that again, I would say is for the next section we get onto information, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Let's just stick with 1B and see if we can nail this. Anybody got anything else on the risks to the drylining itself? Have we exhausted that?
So
Just-
penetrations, remember, also include doors. So if you change, if you, and you may have already covered this in your door section, but if you put a non-compliant door, which apparently is one of the things that happened at Grenfell, the flat doors were changed, then the wall itself will become non-compliant because it won't perform.
Cool. What about painting and things like that? Is that a risk? Have we got paint on there?
No, I'm not aware of painting being a risk.
Mainly to finish rather than performance. For example, certain types of paint aren't recommended onto dry lining, but that's primarily due to reflection of the surface and finish related issues.
What about, yeah, so obviously a lot of what we're doing here is focused around fire and structural safety, but a growing thing is mold. So are there any risks that would result in mold that people might do to the wall to prevent it from breathing, maybe?
No,
Would
mold comes either through lack of ventilation, cold spots on the outside of the wall, and sometimes mold happens quite quickly where the boards are installed in the wet, and they should be replaced if that's the case.
So is
I think
that a
it's more of
risk?
a design risk,
Yeah.
George, in terms of putting a gypsum-based board with no humidity properties or not cement-based into a bathroom or shower area. So it would be incorrect specification.
Okay.
But it's certainly
Okay,
a risk,
Alan.
no doubt.
Alan.
Hi. Yeah, Alan Speed of PRP. So yeah, I was thinking before someone mentioned mold, I was thinking moisture. And we know the NHBC are getting really hot on water problems over and above fire issues at the moment on some external wall issues. But I mean, Drylining is put on external walls. It forms part of through wall systems, and moisture is an issue with that. I don't know if that's within scope of this document.
Could you put a note on that for me, Alan, in the chat, please?
Okay.
Fantastic.
Could I just ask a question? Would firewalls include external walls, Joe?
Yeah, as Alan just mentioned, actually, the risk is where SFS has been used to create the external wall, and they also need to have fire protection, and they sort of come under the barrier of, as Alan has suggested, through wall.
Right.
Different construction, I would say, over an internal partition.
Okay.
There are risks there, and a lot of the risks come down at the front end specification. So, for example, you can't put a timber patras in an external wall.
Okay.
Okay, so is there anything else we need to add into this section so we can move on to question 2?
Well, just on that, Jimmy, I know you're on the call. Have the board manufacturers changed any guidance recently on patrasing on internal walls, internal firewalls? Or Bob, you might know that too.
Hi, I'm Bob Allen, technical consultant for the GBDA. I'm not aware of any changes. I think there's Jimmy on the call for Canal, whether they're aware of any changes, I don't know, but I'm not aware of any. But whilst I'm talking, can I just, on that point that you just made about external walls, are we saying that is part of this document? Because if it is, then we're introducing maybe load-bearing elements, which means what is the firewall description at the beginning would need looking at.
That, I think probably that would be down to what Joe and I think Joe and Matt were the principal people that were putting this together. So, I mean, certainly external walls are important, aren't they? And we don't have another asset type covered, so I think we probably should try and accommodate external walls.
I would do it separately. I think there are so many
differences.
Yeah, I think the construction is different, and the sort of parameters they have to deal with are greater. And although
Okay.
internal walls still have wind loading, external ones have different ones.
Okay,
Well-
right. So we've decided it's going to be internal. Let's scroll down to question 2.
Richard, could we also just make a note that we probably ought to hold one on external firewalls? So
Yeah, I've got
that's
that,
another
mate.
session. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right, question 2. What information is needed about drylining firewalls to ensure they perform correctly? And let's just scroll down and see what we've got there already. Just, that's it. Right, we've got requirements, specification, performance, materials, construction, installation, inspection, maintenance. Right, so we've got a lot of sections there. Let's so we'll do them in order, obviously. So we'll start with general requirements. What information do we need to know? We're just doing requirements. Type of dry lining, size of walls, manufacturer of products. Anything else in requirements?
I would maybe
I don't
just
know.
mention the substrate they're being fixed into.
Can I throw one in here that I'm not quite sure if this is the right place, but it's an issue for smoke ventilation people, and it's a question of when is a shaft wall a shaft wall, when is it a wall and when is it a duct, and because it affects the sort of dampers that we use, smoke control dampers that we use, and how we fit them. So there's quite a bit of disagreement around the industry, and so the use of the wall, whether it's being used as a wall that forms part of a shaft or whether it is a shaft, I think there's an issue around there. I'm not quite sure where it fits or how it gets covered, but it's a pretty of a hot topic in our bit of the industry at the moment.
Isn't it about the application of the product, in so much that if a dry lining firewall, shaft wall, or whatever you call it, is utilized to transit smoke as part of a smoke ventilation system, then there should be some form of test data, or the product for that application should at least have some proven data that it's suitable for a ventilation system, especially when you talk about smoke ventilation systems coping with under pressures of a 1500 Pascal, for example, when I've no idea what the furnace pressures are.
Well, let's just hold that a minute, because we've got a section on performance, which is probably where that would go. Jimmy, just to go back to what you were saying about the substrata.
Yeah, so 99.9% of our fire test data will be in a concrete rig. If you start fixing that to cross-laminated timber or timber trusses, you need the substrate needs consideration that the
Okay, could you
firewall is
put that
being
in the
installed
chat
into.
for me, so just can copy it over? Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
So can I just pick up, Richard? So that the point that Colin was making and that I was making, we seem to sort of glossed over that a bit, but I would have thought that would have been in requirements for type of dry lining, and I mean, there's people on here that are obviously work in the dry lining industry and know this better than me, and I don't know if any of them have got any comments to make.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm on, and I'm trying to find some documents. So I've got a specifier's guide to dry lining that I'm going to put in the link as well.
But is that something that people in that side of the industry are getting asked about, or have any, you know, because it's something that we end up with a problem, but then when it works back, we work back through a builder who goes back through a dry liner, and we often end up with what we end up with, which may not be the right thing, because people don't understand that it's just not a bit of plasterboard. It's a bit more technical than that.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that we have.
Yeah. You're right. The competency. So a really simple example: if you take a half-hour fire-rated plasterboard that everybody talks about, and as those in the industry will tell you, there is no such thing that exists. There is no such thing as a half-hour fire-rated plasterboard, and that's where we've got to get the competency right in the sector.
Yeah, well, we've got a section on competency coming up.
Yeah.
So
no,
yeah.
So going back to the specification and the requirements, I'm going to send you through a document which is how to specify dry lining, which has got a lot of these questions in.
Excellent.
Okay.
Alan.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Yeah, so just picking up on an earlier comment, something we're tackling in the office at the moment is the specification of smoke shafts to match the interfacing elements as opposed to matching the ADB or compliance, fire resistance requirements. So I'll give you an example. If you take a smoke control damper from one of the leading suppliers, they test those dampers typically in 120-minute walls, and the walls are of a minimum thickness. So if your building is only a 90-minute fire resistance building, structural fire protection, then you find that the wall doesn't meet the tested parameters of the smoke control damper. So it's an interfacing element which is actually driving the performance of the wall as opposed to the regulations.
Right, okay. Well, we've got a section we're just coming up to shortly on performance and the information we need for performance, which I think that sounds like Alan. Could you pop that into the chat for me?
Okay.
I think that's I think that's a particularly important thing from my limited knowledge of this area, Alan. So if you could put that in, I think that would be very helpful.
Let me try.
Yeah, and then we can pick that up when we get to performance, Alan.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, anybody else for requirements?
Richard, we've covered, I mean, the previous statement covers testing, but I would say that that really needs to be at the forefront of any requirements. I mean, what is the performance requirement of the wall, and does the specified wall have the correct test information to show that it achieves that performance
Absolutely.
requirement?
I think that absolutely. So I'm going to say it again. Could you pop that in the chat for me, and then Jess will pick that up. Okay, anybody else for requirements? Let's scroll down, Jess.
I'd just like to ask the team a question on the specification and the performance requirements. That's one of the things that we've been working through over the last couple of years, and that is you've got a prescriptive specification and a descriptive specification. So, and I think those are typically defined in something like MBS chorus. Am I wrong on that? Does anybody know?
It kind of varies, George. It depends. We sometimes see drawings, or you don't see them so much anymore, but it would have equal or approved. So it might have our product name or BG's or Signat's and then just say equal or approved, or it will give you just the performance criteria. But where we would like to get to is that it specifies precisely what the products are that go into the system that lead to the performance. Otherwise, it opens up the possibility that you've got equal or approved for different products, but they don't work in conjunction.
Yes, that's certainly the direction of travel, I think, Jimmy, that most people are coming down. Because as I understand it, if somebody swaps out BG for Canal or vice versa, that is quite fundamental.
Correct.
It
All right, let's
happens
scroll
less
down,
now.
and
Yeah.
because I think we're talking about performance and we've not actually looked at what we've actually got here already. There we go.
So sorry, just on specification,
Uh-huh.
we should probably move away from product integrity rating and talk about system insulation and integrity performance.
Just, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else got anything?
So just before we move off that, I would still like to capture whether people are. I'm not promoting MBS Chorus. I'm just trying to understand what a specification actually looks like.
So we would provide a Canal K10 document, or there'll be a K40 for ceilings or something like that, and then that will be dropped into an architectural specification. They may well use MBS Chorus or their own platform or other things, but we are providing that basis for them to take the information through the systems we specify. But I think we should advocate it being, you know, a performance-driven specification rather than vague and open.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question about specification? If we if we have a construction that is used as a smoke shaft, then there is a requirement for it to be able to cope under pressure. So the specifications don't actually have any sort of pressure ratings for a system, do they? Because under the integrity and the structure, that would be covered elsewhere, wouldn't it? So am I right in saying that there isn't a way of specifying a shaft for pressure directly under the normal specifications? I was hoping the fast would answer.
It's normally, Ian, well, for example, whereas it's the shaft is contained with a shaft wall construction. There are I've yet to see a detail which is based upon that shaft wall construction being sealed. What normally happens is it's normally sort of excessive mastic is used, and then a pressure test is done to make sure that it achieves or falls within the required leakage per hour. So there's not a specification as such. When it's specified, there's normally just a leakage rate in there, and then it's done by site testing.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Let's just stop. Ian, could you put your hand up, please, in future, because it's just getting a bit chaotic. And as I said at the top, if there are adjacent subjects we want to discuss, we'll discuss that afterwards if we've got time. Let's really focus on these questions now because we've got a lot to get through. Alan.
Yes, if you could scroll down a little bit so we can look at performance, all the performance bullet point. That's fine. If you look at the fourth one down, I think fire integration should be fire integrity, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Right, make that integrity, Jess.
Thanks.
Colin?
I'm sorry, chaps. I'm trying to lower my hand and raise it later on, but
okay.
No problem.
Okay, anybody else got anything to add into performance?
Let's crack on.
Right, let's crack on. We'll scroll down. Materials construction. Let's do materials and construction first and then get on to installation. Surrounding materials. So, Jimmy, that covers your substrata, doesn't it?
Maybe, yeah, I guess.
I can see Joe and Bob have got their hands up. The only thing is that we've only got half an hour left. So is it something pressing, Joe?
No, I've added them in the chat. So
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, if you can really use the chat, especially now, that would be very, very helpful. Okay, let's scroll down. Let's scroll down. Anything for construction, installation. Have a look at that.
Yeah, one of the things on the installation and possibly design as well is actually breaking up in the CAD models, breaking up the different types of walls so that they are held in the right form within the CAD systems and the BIM models. What I mean by that is that it may be that if you've got the specifications of the wall changing along a running length, which I understand does happen, often the way the BIM model is created, they'll just use a generic wall and then use some annotation to differentiate it. So that's one of the things that we've learned, that we need to encourage people to model properly.
Okay, anybody got anything to add in there or amend? Pop it in the chat, preferably, and just we'll copy it over and we can look at it. Okay, let's scroll down to inspection, Jez. Inspection and maintenance. Okay. Just give just a chance to catch up with everybody's comments.
Yeah, it is important that this guidance also covers sort of maintenance and remedial works and things like that, which may not be, organized in the as actually projects, as it were. It could just be repairs.
Okay, so just scroll down to maintenance. Have we got anything? Oh, we've got some new. Where's maintenance? There it is. Let's see that, and we can nail that.
The inspection bit is an important element that we're looking at the moment, and I guess they've got to be intrusive inspections to see whether something is likely to be performing.
So anything in maintenance.
Is there anybody on the call that is involved in maintenance? I think most people are involved in new build or in design or manufacturing.
We are involved in some sort of refurbishment and repair, not the practical application of it, George, obviously, but the design implications of repair works and maintenance works. As well as that, we're involved in production of the project operation and maintenance manuals.
Yeah.
So I think one of the misconceptions, certainly with the O&M manual, is that plasterboards and drylining systems are going to have far more complex maintenance requirements than they actually have. Generally, it's just repair of boards and stud. There's not that sort of ongoing maintenance interval as such, although and this was brought up in the recent FIS housing meeting with Joe, perhaps if you could sort of just quickly go through this about the three-sided service openings.
Yeah.
That Lang O'Rourke and Mace were talking to us about.
So it's about having evidence that what you plan to do, you have evidence of compliance right through it. So where you normally have a builder's work opening, the builder's work opening is treated as a four-sided opening. Where the height is restrictive, a lot of designers now are putting the service zone too close to the head, the soffit, and so it starts to interfere with the deflection head. And so a number of openings are being designed as a three-sided opening. But if that opening hasn't been tested by the systems owner and critically hasn't been tested by the fire stopping manufacturers, then you've got no evidence of compliance.
Right, so does any of that have any bearing on the maintenance section of this document? Is there anything that you've covered that should be added into the maintenance section in terms of information required?
So what I've put in the chat is ensuring that any remedial work is in accordance with the original system owner's instructions using that manufacturer's products.
Excellent, excellent.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, let's scroll down.
Not scrolling, Jess.
Right. What tasks are required to ensure dry lining and firewalls are installed, commissioned, inspected and maintained properly? Right, scroll down now, Jess. Right, so we've got general at the top, then we go into specification installation. So have a look at the general ones first. Okay, just scroll down and let's just have a look at what's in the others so we're not duping. Okay, scroll down a bit more. And a bit more. Is that everything? Okay, back to the top, mate. Okay, so
Just put a note in there about the benchmark, and it's a bit lower under installation.
Brilliant. As I say, everything that goes in the chat we'll pick up. So whether it's a bullet point to go on here or a note about a bullet point for us to rewrite or relook at, then it's all there. It's just getting it on there.
This is a living document, by the way. So if you look at this afterwards and decide that you want to clarify something or add something, then please do so and let Richard have it.
Yeah, this will be posted all over our various websites, primarily on our black box site, where you can actually go and make comments that we can then update the actual document with.
And your names will be on as contributors, by the way. So
yes, you could even hit the front cover. How are we doing?
I think let's go down to specification.
Yeah, let's go down to. Yeah, we go. Right, scroll down, Jess.
What are hold points, Matt?
Hold points. Hold points are points within the construction where you plan a stop to do an inspection, George. So
Okay, yeah.
Before
Thank
you second fix, for example.
Thank you.
Okay, scroll down a bit more, Jess. Are people still typing?
No.
Okay, let's go to question 4 then. Excellent, excellent. As George said, once we've pulled this together and amended, it will go out to all of you to have another look at anyway. So it's just if we get them.
Just before we move on, Joe, is there anything in terms of inspections that is it's proposed by FIS?
Yeah, we've got a quality inspection plan.
Okay.
I'll find it. But yeah, there is. I think what you should say is you should adopt a quality inspection plan. We provide one for our members, so that there is a point in terms of stuff which is for members only. We give it all away. No need to become a member.
Yeah. Martin, AD, is there anything that, for example, you would do in terms of standardized inspections that you might be able to share?
Not sure about sharing it, but it should be captured in the construction control plan. How you're going to, you should set out how you're going to go about doing your inspections and where you're going to keep your records. So it's a prerequisite to all activities, that one.
No, I was thinking more about specific tasks. I mean, I know in the past you've told me that that compartmentation is one of the biggest challenges that you have in terms of defects and things like that. Yeah. So I just wondered if there was a checklist or something like that that you would.
There'll be dozens of checklists, George, to be fair. There are standard checklists for this sort of work, but you need to make them bespoke for the particular wall that you're constructing. I think it's fair to say. You really don't want to go down the template route. Sorry. It should be bespoke for each and every application.
Okay, let's scroll down to question 4. Right, what level of competency training needs to be in place? Now, let's just look at the headings. We've got installation, scroll down, Jess. Maintenance. Right, installation and maintenance. So we're talking about competency for installing and maintaining. Have a look at those. Now, these are generic that pretty much cover right across all the asset types we're dealing with. Is there anything specific to dry lining? Does anybody know that we should be having in there?
There is some work being carried out by Working Group 2 on the subject. It's not
Okay.
quite there yet, but the work is being undertaken by Working Group 2 and also by FIS, particularly around dry lining. Might be worth just keeping an eye on that. Yeah.
Any idea when that's likely to come out?
I would hope by the end of the year, George, but yeah, I'd hope by the end of the year.
Cool, thank you.
Couple of items that could go on there. Fixtures pack, all too often, and having the right information within the dry lining fixtures pack. All too often see fixtures packs with no fire strategy information, which is quite often what leads to the issues that we've been speaking about with fire compartmentation. They don't know where the fire compartment line is and where the corners are, etc. And the other thing is toolbox talks. Just having a run through a site-based toolbox talk before building an area or before building a certain system or a combination of systems can help highlight problems and address any misunderstanding of different operatives.
So that's actually information really we're talking about there, aren't we? Rather than competency. Could you know what I'm going to say, don't you? Could you type it and put it so that we can put that into the information section?
Yep.
Actually, both of those points, which I think we need to capture. Anybody else?
The CPA, George, have produced a guidance on anybody connected with using a construction product and levels of competence that should be required for those people. And it's in the chat.
Brilliant, thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Okay. Right, let's scroll down. And we'll have a quick look at change management. How should changes to dry lining and firewalls be managed and recorded? Again, much of this is generic, but if you've got anything specific. Anything maybe more specific to dry lining that should be in here? Is that the last one, Jess? Oh no, it's not, is it? Okay. Is that the last one, Jess? There we go. Well, that's quite an exhaustive list, isn't it? Anybody got anything they want to add into that? Okay. Jess, are people still typing?
I don't think so.
Okay, that being the case, let's well, thank you. We've obviously got a lot of work to do on these documents, and that will be done. And as I say, that will go out to you all to have another look at in a more leisurely manner and give us feedback. Now, the section 2, I should have said at the top, we're looking at information slightly differently now and looking to dig deeper into that section. So, George, do you want to have a quick run through of our new approach?
Yes, for some reason it's disappeared. No, I've got it. Okay. Yeah, so this is something actually we started last year. What we're going to be asking for is we've obviously made some good progress today, but we'd like some, if people are interested in contributing just maybe another hour and a half session to mop it up. There's 3 areas that we're doing. One is to look at data and turn it into something that's more meaningful. Another is process, and the other is application. So we'd like you to add your name to the chat, as it were, and if you're willing to give a little bit more time on that as a follow-up session. This is the work that we've been trying to do to try and make sure that people get the right information for doing certain tasks. And this is just an example that we've done based on the rating methodology to say who's responsible for actually providing, maybe the design life, for example. These aren't, I don't think these are quite right, but being able to go through and say who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who just needs to be kept informed. So what we've done is looked at each of the attributes that were defined, and then we'd like people to, just from your perspective, go through and agree this. So if you're willing to collaborate on that, that would be helpful. The other thing that so if you are willing to put a bit of time into doing that, put your name in the chat now and put your name and then data or process or application. Any of those 3 or all of those 3 could be involved in doing that, and we'll follow up with you. Do you like this methodology? Does this make sense? We're just trying to make it so that people aren't overwhelmed with information.
Yes, I think principal designer has a place in there, George.
Yes.
So,
yes.
The principal designer under CDM is all too often possibly deliberately overlooked to some extent, but the role of the principal designer should be bringing all that information that's been gathered together and ultimately approving its suitability for use within the building as a whole.
Yeah, certainly I'm hearing a lot about that at the moment, and there are some companies that are taking on that, stepping up to the plate to take on that. It's a challenging role though, isn't it?
It is. It's the thing is where you've got lots of different packages all working together. They won't let the dry lining package or personnel involved within the dry lining package won't necessarily know the M&E or fire stopping packages inside out. So it's having that to some extent used to be the role of the architect. From what I understand, is becoming less so.
Anna, would you have a view on that? Are you there, Anna? Hi.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Would you have a view on that? The role of the principal designer in overseeing these things? Is it do you provide that role?
Yes, we do. And the role of principal designer really will become very essential at the point of gateway 2 submissions, basically.
Yeah.
But in theory, the principal designer cannot take the responsibility for every single system that's designed. In a way, the designers are taking the responsibility for the for the integration of the systems, and basically ultimately the architect actually, whether they are the principal designer or not. In some situations, the architect is not the principal designer, and they're a separate role. But the architect is responsible for coordinating the systems so that they work. And then principal designer is really taking the role of a kind of checking and understanding the input from all other designers that need to be kind of coordinated. So it's not really on the principal designer to understand every minute detail of the design, because that would be quite difficult.
Of course.
So the fire strategy will be in place, the specifications will be in place, the overall design will be coordinated, and at that point, the principal designer is actually checking that everyone knows their duties and has thought about their duties and has designed the coordinated design, you know, as per regulation.
Good, thank you.
Does that help, or?
Yes, it does. It certainly helps me.
Okay.
It does. It's an area that I can see becoming the subject of a great deal of increased focus as a result of the building safety bill. So I think what we're going to see at the moment, we see too many projects with a fire consultant taking very much a sort of backseat role, just looking at the overall strategy rather than individual interfaces. We see a lot of specifications coming through asking for testing of all interfaces and all systems, which just isn't possible. I mean, for example, you can't test a curved wall, you can't test a splayed interface under our current test standards. So it's a matter of getting information that has gone through a correct approval process, and that correct approval process should consist of multiple individuals from all commenting in accordance with their area of expertise.
Yeah, my impression is that the role of the principal designer is going to be important. Also, the role of the fire engineer, I think, is going to become increasingly important. And I'm also seeing quite a lot now of clerks of work being brought back, which, you know, that's another interesting development as a result of the whole new regulatory regime. All of which I think are positive signs in terms of delivering greater quality. But, you know, clearly there's a cost in that. But I think it's the cost also of doing it right first time. Yeah, rather than. Good. Okay. Richard, do you want to wrap up?
Absolutely. Well, that's been an excellent session. Thank you again very much for your time and your inputs, all of which are valued, believe me. Well, we've got one more tomorrow, and then the normal service will be resumed with working groups and work streams, which I hope you'll all come along to. We'll keep you informed of those. Other than that, as I say, you'll receive copies of this draft document once it's prepared, and we look forward to your input to that, and hopefully see you soon.
We've got a design working group meeting on Wednesday, I think, Richard.
That you're right, we have, yes. So please come along.
Yeah, good. Good. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Hope you found it useful. Cheers.
Yeah, have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, really good. Thanks.
Thanks. Over and out.